Hi, you're listening to the Professional Speaks podcast with me, Craig McKellar, your host. As an ex-Big Four auditor for 6 years, I now run a specialist recruitment consultancy called McKellar Consulting. Throughout this podcast, I speak to senior leaders from the professional services community, past, present and future. These leaders work in accounting and finance, audit, tax, corporate finance, consulting, legal and investments. In the comfort of their own office, I will be posing questions to our guests to gain insights from them across a variety of topics, including balancing work and life, mental health and mindset, risk-taking, and effective leadership. These insights will help us learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what we want to achieve in our careers. Here's what's coming up on today's episode.
I didn't really have a plan. I think I should be pretty apparent, jumping from KPMG to Morgan Stanley and then moving to Canada for personal reasons. There was no grand master plan.
Yep.
I sort of just took each step as it comes. So I think that's a pretty big point for people listening to this, especially earlier in their career. It's like, you don't need to think that you have to all figure it out, because it's not that, if I do X, then I do Y, I'm going to get Z. Things don't really work out that way. And it's not false modesty. I think I've done some things well in my career, but I've been really lucky as well. I've been in the right place at the right time. And just somebody used a great word to describe me recently on my career path. They called me spunny. I've heard that word for a while, but I think there's a big part of that I have been in the right place at the right time. So, and sometimes you can be doing absolutely everything right, and there's not necessarily that bit of luck that you need to get to the next level. Mm-hmm. And the opposite is true as well.
In this episode, I am joined by Marjoribanks, who is Head of Audit and Assurance and also Vice-Chair of Johnston Carmichael, which is a large UK accountancy firm. Topics discussed include his journey to partner and how timing and luck played a part, as well as taking up interesting hobbies. Graham, thanks very much for taking part in the podcast. So for people that don't know you, you're currently Head of Audit and Assurance, as well as Vice Chair at Johnston Carmichael, which is a large UK accountancy firm. So thanks for coming along today. Just starting off, it'd be good to help people know who you are, so maybe just a bit about your background would be great if you don't mind sharing.
Okay, no, thanks Craig, very happy to be here chatting to you. In terms of background, so I grew up in Falkirk. I went to Falkirk High School. It was quite a mixed background. I've got quite a few friends that went to university, but lots of them that didn't. And that's one thing I would say, that it took me quite a bit of time to get my head around that when I went to university, and then subsequently became a CA. It was a lot of people from different backgrounds to what I was used to. Mm-hmm. So that was a bit of a culture shock for me. And I think my family background's probably a little bit different to what most people are used to as well. So my dad was a professional football player, and then he quit that to become an actor, and my mum was a teacher. I've got two sisters and a brother, and one of my sisters works in the nursery, and my other sister and my brother are both primary school teachers. Mm-hmm. So I'm the only one from a family that has a career in business. Yeah. So again, just I guess the benefit of that is I've had lots of people in my life that come from very different backgrounds, which gives you a sort of different perspective on things. Mm-hmm.
So the education route wasn't for you in that sense?
No, not in that sense, although all credit to my family for doing that. Yeah. I think it'd be a tough job, very rewarding, but very different to Elijah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm married to a primary teacher, so I get it. So that's helpful. Running through your career background then, so I know you spent a bit of time overseas, a bit of time in industry. Do you mind just giving us a kind of whistle-stop tour of what that's looked like so far?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, whistle-stop tour probably still will be quite long.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I left university and I had really no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't study accountancy at university. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I bought a book. It was a Sunday Times Top 100 Employers, and just went through them one by one and researched on, do I think I could do this or not? And that's how I arrived at doing a CA. I thought I could learn about business and I could keep my options open for a bit of travel. Mm-hmm. So that's how I ended up doing that. I accepted a job with Anderson's, and Anderson's gave me a loan to go travelling, and I went out to New Zealand with 3 of my friends from school, which was brilliant. The bad news was that Enron happened just after that. So I no longer had a job to go to. The good news was I didn't have to pay back that loan. Well, in the music of travelling, so that was good. I then took a job with KPMG, and I stayed there for over 5 years. Had a very good experience there, but then I moved into industry in what was probably my second career disaster already, and I moved into Morgan Stanley to work on subprime loans in 2007. And for anyone who knows the history of the global financial crisis, that was not the best timing. So I did that for a couple of years, and clearly that wasn't going to be a long-term career for me. And as luck would have it, the guy I sat beside went to join BDO in Chicago, and we stayed in touch. And he contacted me about a job in Toronto. And at that point in time, my wife and I had been going through fertility treatment unsuccessfully. It was a very stressful time, and we decided, let's just go for a change of scenery. So that's what we did. We went across to Toronto, and then she got pregnant in the first week, which was the first of 3 Canadian children that we have. So my eldest, Lillian, was born in Toronto, and my other 2, Bethany and Callum, were both born in Calgary. So overall, I spent 4 years in Toronto. I spent 6 years in Calgary. I became a partner with BDO, and then I became the head of audit for Western Canada, and then latterly the head of audit for the Greater Toronto area. And then in 2019, I moved back to Johnston Carmichael as the head of audit, and then this year I became the vice-chair. That brings us up to date.
No, that's great. And I said whistle stop because there's so much we could go into in all of that. All of those are lots of different jobs, different geographies. The amount of stuff you must have learned from going overseas and working on all these types of firms, I'm sure we could talk about for a long time. But I guess as this podcast is kind of centered around professional services, maybe kind of focusing on your experience working at different firms, Big Four, large mid-tier, large independent. Is there anything you want to say on the difference between working across them all, like how they differ? Is it maybe just the client portfolios are different, or is there maybe more to it than that?
There probably is more to it than that, but when I started out, the other thing that attracted me was the strong brand of a multinational, and I think that's because I didn't really know any better at that point in time. And I don't have anything bad to say about the larger firms, because if you want to get that excellent name in your CV, good training, that it is a great pathway for a lot of people, but it's not. What I discovered is not the only pathway. When you go to the mid-tier, you find that you probably do get a lot more hands-on experience working with owner-managed businesses. You probably do learn more of the kind of end-to-end of a file. You probably have more interaction with your senior people, business owners, than you might do at some of the Big Four. And again, that might benefit some people. It's not necessarily for everyone, but the experiences are very different. And then certainly that's how we try and sell it, is when you come to us, you are going to see probably an awful lot more. But I wouldn't knock anyone that decides that they just want to, if they want to have a career working for very large organisations, multinationals, and get that on their CV, I think it's a perfectly valid career choice. But I think a lot of people are increasingly realising that it's not the only way to do it. And if you train with a mid-tier firm or a smaller firm, you make a different sort of experience that is equally valid and in some cases possibly better.
And in your own experience, what was it moving to Johnston Carmichael, or was it moving to BDO that you started to maybe get that idea of, I'm getting exposed a bit more here than maybe I would in the Big Four?
I think it was moving to BDO. What I realised pretty quickly was that with my clients at KPMG, so Prudential was my biggest client there, and they had so many qualified CAs that everything had gone through so many levels of review, fantastic control environments, that by the time it came to me, I wasn't really finding that much. And you'd expect that you wouldn't find that much dealing with an organisation of that size. When I moved to BDO, you realise that a lot of your clients, well, at that time anyway, I think it might be different now, a lot of your clients, they're really relying on you. They don't have that serious bench strength internally. So, when there's a new accounting standard, or there's something there's a new development, they are really relying on you to almost be like an extension of their CFO. So you have to roll up your sleeves and see things a lot more end to end. So I enjoyed that, to be honest with you. I probably learned more in my first 18 months at BDO than I did in my time with KPMG. And again, to be clear, that's not a criticism of KPMG. I think it's just the nature of the clients. And in some ways, it's actually a compliment that their clients are much larger, much better control environments. So, but as a consequence of that, I probably didn't learn as much as I would have liked to, and I learned an awful lot at BDO.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So obviously lots of people go into the audit profession to travel, amongst other things. That's why I went into it. I thought I could travel with this profession because firms have offices all over the world. What would your advice be for people listening to this who are auditors, whether they're overseas and want to come to the UK, or they're in the UK and want to go overseas, about, I guess, doing it, but also what did you learn most from maybe working in a different culture?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. The first thing is do it. Because especially when you're earlier on in your career, you want to get the best experience you possibly can, as much experience as you possibly can, and be exposed to a different range of personalities. And I think that's what I learned from it. There was a lot of things I learned, but I was exposed to things that I didn't have growing up, and I didn't have with my early stages of my career in Scotland. So as an example, a very significant number of my partners in Calgary were Mormon, and that's not something I knew an awful lot about prior to moving out to Calgary, and allowed me to understand a bit more about their culture. I've worked with a lot of Jewish people, I've worked with a lot of Muslims, a lot of Asians, and I've learned a different perspective from every one of them. So I would say that's a huge reason to do it, but let's not forget it's really good fun as well. I wouldn't trade the life experiences that I had during that time for anything, and that will stay with me, and just experiencing a different way of life. And in Canada, it's not even really one way of life. Just spent a lot of time in Toronto, a lot of time in Montreal, a lot of time in Vancouver, a lot of time in Calgary, and they're not like one another. So even within one country, I was seeing lots of different cultures, and it had lots of different experiences. And it's not obvious how it helps you in your career, but it does, because then when you try and connect with people, you come back to Scotland and you do have a bit different personality types, and the more you can kind of expose yourself to, I think the better equipped you are to deal with the different personality types that you'll eventually work with. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. And I guess in the profession, or in any client-facing role in professional services, not only in audit, it is, like I just said, client-facing. As you're meeting people, you're meeting very different people, and so any life experiences that can help you in that and have different perspectives, would shape you well for the role. So your career progressed, in audit. You got up to partner in BDO. For people that are aspiring to be a partner, it might not be an audit, it might be in another service line. Obviously, not everybody makes it to partner. Not everybody wants to get to partner, but for those that do want it, not everyone makes it. And there's different reasons. It might be the environment that they're in, and there's just not that opportunity. It might not be the business case. They might not have certain experiences or skill sets that's needed. When you're looking back on your journey, what do you think's kind of contributed? What contributed to you kind of getting to partner?
I think you and I have had a conversation about this previously, and I think it's quite easy for people to kind of look back and sort of write the story about what happened. I've made it to this point, and it was because I did X, Y, and Z. But I think I've been pretty clear that I didn't really have a plan. I think I should be pretty apparent. Jumping from KPMG to Morgan Stanley and then moving to Canada for personal reasons, there was no grand master plan.
Yep.
I sort of just took each step as it comes. So I think that's a pretty big point for people listening to this, especially earlier in their career. Is like, you don't need to think that you have to have all figured out, because it's not that if I do X and I do Y, I'm going to get Z. Things don't really work out that way, and it's not false modesty. I think I've done some things well in my career, but I've been really lucky as well. I've been in the right place at the right time, and just somebody used a great word to describe me recently on my career path. They called me spunny. I hadn't heard that word for a while, but I think there is a big part of that I have been in the right place at the right time. So, and sometimes you can be doing absolutely everything right, and there's not necessarily that bit of luck that you need to go to the next level. And the opposite is true as well. So I would say don't fixate on it. Just try and do all the right things, get all the right experience that you can, The other big thing I would say is try and, like, I might contradict myself in this one, but try and say yes to things. That's always what I did, is like I kind of threw myself into things, and I got an awful lot of experience, whether that was going to new locations or doing technical work, and again I built up a lot of skills. So if you do that, you can get a reputation as somebody that can get things done, and that's really important as well. So I would say try not to think too long term, because there's a lot of things that you can't control. So just focus on what you can control, and then hope that you get a little bit of luck or a good break that takes you where you want to go.
And do you mean say yes to opportunities? I guess you're getting an opportunity to do something that someone thinks you can do, rather than some people say yes to things that maybe they can't do, and then they have to go and learn how to do it quickly. Or you just to be clear, are you saying say yes to opportunities, or just say yes to things because that's the way you learn?
But I hadn't really intended talking about this, but the latter was definitely how I felt my career. I remember when I went out to Canada, and I think because I had a funny accent, they would sort of like overpromise about what I knew and what I could do. As I'd be getting billed out as like Canada's foremost expert in this topic, and thinking, well, hang on a second, that's not really true. But I'd find myself in a plane out from Toronto going out to Vancouver to present on a subject that I was meant to be an expert on, but probably wasn't. And get my head in all the books. It was a long flight. I would do all my research, and I was super prepared for it. But the irony of that was that by the time I'd done that, often enough, I did genuinely become an expert in those things because I did the work. And so I could have quite easily said, no, hang on a second, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Maybe you've overbilled me here. Like so let's be a bit more cautious. But I didn't do that. I just said, right, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get it done. And I learned an awful lot from doing that. And that's been a fairly consistent theme, as I have put myself outside my comfort zone quite a lot. So yes, I think there's a degree of that. Is that the smartest thing to do? Well, you need to be careful, because we are chartered accountants. We're meant to be confident in what we do, so you can't just go and wing it entirely. But I definitely said yes to a lot of things, and then thought, I better figure out how I'm going to get this done to a decent standard, and that's how I learned. I mean, to be honest, I see it a lot in professional services. I think that it's just the nature of, there are lots of clients needing, expert advice, needing intelligent advice on things. So many people in professional services, you do have to learn. I mean, I think I've said this to you before, but those working in like a regulatory role, can look at the FCA handbook. They don't have to know it off by heart. They need to get things right, so they need to look at it. It's the same with kind of what you're doing, and it's just reading the theory, understanding it, and articulating it to a client. So I don't think you need to feel bad about doing any of that. I think that's a really important point, because as people talk about automation and AI, ultimately things like AI are going to be able to do a lot of that for you. True. So that's not your differentiator in the future. Your differentiator is exactly what you've said. It's how you actually build relationships with people, and how you can sort of break that stuff down and make it, break down something complex and make it simple, and make it meaningful for an individual person. So again, just making sure that you are able to get those different perspectives, those soft skills, that emotional intelligence. That bit's really, really important, because in the future, that the research bit, the knowledge bit, is going to be an awful lot easier, and an awful lot more people are going to have access to that. So you have to differentiate yourself by thinking, what are you actually bringing to the table here? And is your ability to connect with people and make it meaningful. That's what's important. Yeah, and you're right. That ability to connect with people, that's emotional intelligence we're kind of talking about as well, aren't we? So yes, you need intelligence in terms of the work that you do, but emotional intelligence is important as well. And I guess going back to me saying that not everybody gets to partner, sometimes people can lack those people skills with clients, where maybe something, a curveball happens in their business, and they need some advice, they need some understanding, some empathy, whatever, and it's not stuff that you can advise a client out of a book. It's using emotional intelligence. Would you agree with that? Has that helped you along the way with clients? Yeah, massively. I think it's something that you learn over time. I'm a fairly introverted person, but I guess the benefit of that is you're probably more likely to observe what's going on around me and figure out how I can adapt my style to what the person actually needs, and having lots and lots of repetitions as well. Again, people from different backgrounds, people from different companies, people from different cultures, you sort of get a sense of how you can flex your style over time. I definitely think that's benefited me. And in contrast, I do meet a lot of people that are extremely bright, but some people can come across like the human version of ChatGPT. They can give you a textbook answer to anything, right? But they can't break it down and tell you what it means for them, right? Or why it's practical in a particular scenario, and that's a different skill entirely. So I definitely feel that the work in emotional intelligence and empathy has been huge, and there's very fortunate that both BDO and at Johnston Carmichael I've had access to a lot of training in that. Because it's something that you do need to work hard on, and you do need to kind of think about things from a different perspective all the time. And you need to have good coaches and good mentors that can help you get there, because knowing the answer isn't always enough.
I was just going to ask on that, in terms of the training, because you're right, it doesn't come naturally to everyone, whether it's emotional intelligence or whether it's empathy. So, if for someone listening to this, that thinks I do want to get better at that, but there's no opportunities for me to do so. Is there any advice you'd give to them? Is there should they seek out a mentor? Is that what you're saying? Is there anything that they should read? Is there any, I guess, opportunities that just say yes to that, get yourself in front of those people or get yourself in that opportunity?
I mean, there's always a chance to learn it. Like, yes, it's great if you've got access to mentors. I think that's been really important for me. But I think with any sort of learning, in your early stage of learning something, books are great, right? So learning the theory behind something, if it's something you didn't already know, then that's a great way to learn. But you need to progress beyond that and put it into practice. And that's where just getting lots and lots of experience is great. And that's where a mentor or a coach comes in, because yes, you can put it into practice, but they can maybe either observe you in practice or kind of take a stand back and give you some advice, from giving you a different perspective when you work through it with them. So I think all of those things in combination are pretty important. But it's not things like empathy. It's not something that you only use in your business life, right? You can practice that every day with your friends and family. Practicing better listening skills, you can practice that with anybody at any time. So one of the benefits of moving away, I'm being slightly flippant about this, but you're free to make a lot more mistakes, right? I suppose if you're in the community that you grew up in, you're maybe a bit more fearful about that because you're worried about your reputation. Whereas you go to live in a different place, you're going to make lots of mistakes. I've made lots of mistakes, but it didn't really matter in the long run. And I've been able to come back and take the mistakes I've made, but also build on the good things that I did and bring it back here. So I think that's a big benefit as well, is to take yourself out of that sort of pressure environment, get somewhere else. And if you need to make mistakes, go make mistakes, because in the long run it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you learn. That you're progressing, that you're learning. No, absolutely. Going back to as well, you're touching on people saying yes to opportunities. We've spoken about this before, but what would you advise people in terms of how to make a decision on what to say yes to and what to say no to? Because say yes to things, but you can't say yes to everything. So what's your thought process around what you say yes to, what you don't say yes to? It's quite an interesting question, because that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier when saying I might contradict myself, because I think that younger people in particular are probably better at finding balance in their life and saying no to things, and that's good. That's a good thing. Mental health's a much bigger thing now. Trying to avoid burnout, I think that is really healthy. I don't think I've always been brilliant at that. But there was a benefit to it in the sense of being able to get ahead in my career and learn things that otherwise I wouldn't have. But where you get to is you say yes to a lot of things, and then it mounts up, right? And then you can't possibly say yes to everything. Like, I couldn't possibly respond to every single email, every single LinkedIn request. I would never see my family if that was the case.
Yeah.
So I do have to say no to things now. I don't feel good about it, but I've become a bit more comfortable with it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a good way of doing it is by thinking about, your values, thinking about your culture. And I used to think those things were a lot of nonsense when I was growing up. I don't think that now. I think it's a really important framework for how you do things. And even doing this podcast is a pretty good example of that, because this is a really busy time of year.
Yeah.
There's always, I would have had every possible excuse to say no, but I do value relationships, and I think you and I have gotten pretty well over the years, and you've always been good at coming forward with a bit of advice here and there, and I've appreciated that. So when you asked me to do it, I thought, right, okay, should I do this? And I also thought about my own goals, and one of them is to continue building my profile. I thought, well, if I'm relationship driven, which I think I am, and I want to build my profile, then that's a reason I should say yes when I could easily have said no. So I think if you try and sort of tie it back to what's important in your life, what your goals should be, how your values align, that it can help you simplify your decisions.
And do you think are you saying that's become easier because you've got less time? So, you're in a busier role, you've got family, whereas when you're younger, you don't have, you're maybe not in a role with such responsibility, you maybe don't have a family. And so is it easier for you to say yes things? I know you've just said that younger people are good at saying no to things, but would you say that's a case for you? It's that change in life and progression that's kind of contributed to it.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier. I think it's necessary.
Yeah,
I've got no choice but to say no to things. So when you're in that situation, you are forced to look at things and figure out what the most important things are, and by extension, the other things you have to say no to because you just physically can't. There's not enough hours in the day. So, but if I could go back and do it all again, I'd probably want to sort of get to that point sooner. So rather than saying no simply because I'm so full, so busy doing lots of other things, I don't have time, it would be useful to have a framework for saying no to things along the way. It's so hard though, Craig, because somebody once said to me that half the business development time you do is a waste of time. The problem is you don't know which half. And that's true. You never really know of what you do, what's going to lead to something and what's not. And you also don't want to become too transactional. Well, I'm only going to do this because there's something that's clearly in it for me. Again, that's why I come back to values. I don't think those are necessarily the right values. So it is incredibly complicated, and I'm not saying that I've got it right, but I think it is important to have some sort of framework for making a decision so that you can build that skill up throughout the course of your career, and not just wait until you're way too busy to fit everything in and then kind of scramble around. What are you going to say no to? Yeah,
I mean, I've thought about this, I think my time's more constrained now, having two kids. I'm having a family life, and the hours I work are certainly very different, potentially slightly less than before having kids. Because I just had all the time, so I could just keep working. But was all that time productive? Probably not. Whereas now, laser focus, like you say, because between those hours, it's bedtime routine, etc. Those hours on the weekend, it's family time. And I think if I could go back, maybe. I don't know, the framework you're talking about, if you put some blockers in, your days, right, those are the hours I'm not working, so therefore I need to make this time really productive. I mean, my younger self could have had a really interesting hobbies or doing some volunteering work or things like that, like you're saying, or going to networking events. So framework's, really important, like you say.
So I actually did that. That's one of the first things I did, is say, well, okay, here's the hours that I'm prepared to work, right? And I probably shouldn't say what those hours are, right? But there's always a reason to go beyond that. But what I was finding was that if you didn't cut it off, you could go beyond it every single day. So I would say on a normal day, I'm going to work from this time until this time. And if I'm not going to do that, that has to be a very good reason why I'm not going to do that. Like it's a big client deadline, it's a networking event, and that was probably one of the first things that I did to try and help clarify my thinking on this, because rather than kind of meander through a day and have different conversations or get involved in things you don't need to get involved in, you become much more focused because I've only got X number of hours in this day, and then I'm going to go home and to see my family, or I'm going to go out with friends that night. So that was quite a healthy routine to get into, and I probably need to start doing that again.
Yeah, no, I think it's good for people to hear, particularly who are starting off early in their career, because I think there can be that pressure to feel like that presenteeism, if that's a word, about, oh no, I need to be seen to be working all the time, to see that I'm working hard. But actually, what senior leaders are looking at, is your output. Is the work that you do. So yes, sometimes you will have to work a lot to get the quality up to standard or get something done, but maybe not all the time. And to have that mindset of, if it doesn't take you as long as you thought it was going to do, it was going to take you, then that's okay. Because it's all about the output and the quality. But you don't want people early on in their career to be burning out.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, isn't it? And I'm getting better at that myself, right? Because people talk about work-life balance, and I don't think people remember the time that they left work at 5 o'clock. They remember the good experiences they had with solving a problem or a project they worked on. But inevitably, you do end up putting some hours into that, so you've got to make up that time somehow. And what I am getting better at is realising I'm not feeling it today. I'm not focused. I'd be better off just stopping. I'd be better off going out for a run or walking the dog or doing something else, because then I can keep myself a bit fresher, because there will inevitably become a time that I have to put hours in. Yeah. And if you're doing that and you've accumulated a lot of hours, then you might make mistakes. You might cause yourself undue stress. So I think recognising the time that, okay, on these particular days, I'm just going to finish sharp. I'm going to go and do something fun to keep myself pretty rested, because over here I know that I might have to put some extra time in. That is inevitable, especially when you're working in practice. And I think we need to be honest and transparent about that. But the flexibility is also quite good in practice. It does allow you to do that. You want to finish early one day, that's fine. I'm not going to say a single word about it, because I know that if I'm in the trenches getting something done, you're with me getting it done. But I want it to work for you as well as me. And I think that's something that is a big benefit in practice. But you need to be pretty disciplined to think like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking about finding balance between work and life, you've touched on, before, around hobbies. You've got thoughts around hobbies and kind of what hobbies you should do that are going to be helpful. Do you mind saying a bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that was really game-changing for me was a book called Flow. It's a pretty famous book, and you don't need to read it, because it's a simple concept. If things are too difficult for you, you get anxious. If things are too easy for you, you get bored. But there's a sweet spot in between, where if you can hit that, you sort of forget about anything bad that's going on in your life. And that was definitely the case for me. I used to play a lot of football growing up. I wasn't a fantastic player, but it was what I was used to. So when I was in Canada, I'd go and play a game of football after work, and the thing that was bugging me at the start of the game would still be bugging me at the end of the game. And it's probably because I was playing over 35s or whatever. Not necessarily all that
wasn't
intense.
A challenge,
But it was maybe quite slow paced. But then I took up snowboarding, and it wasn't possible for me to be thinking about work, because all of my mental energy was like, I just need to stay in the snowboard. I'm terrible at this. I'm going to fall repeatedly if I'm not focusing on it. So I realised pretty quickly that to de-stress, you do something that's probably a little bit outside your comfort zone. And the really unusual thing about it was, by not thinking about a problem, you'd often come up with a different type of solution. So I'd be like halfway down a mountain and all of a sudden be like, oh, right, that's what I need to do. And if I could have thought about it all day and not come to that answer, but sometimes by switching off, forcing yourself to switch off, you do. So I quite like doing things like that. I tried to learn to ice skate, same type of thing. If I'm not concentrating here, I'm going to fall and break an arm or something. So all your mental energy goes into to staying on the ice, and I find that hugely beneficial to help me switch off.
I mean, I've not had this vision before of you snowboarding and skateboard and ice skating now, but say that you're a pro at that now. Do you then go and find another hobby that you have to learn about, because now you're just skating around and you're thinking about your problem?
I think you could probably flex the difficulty level. To there's always something more challenging you could do. But for me, it's that being in that environment where it does require you to think about something other than your work, or other than what else is going on in your life. So I think that's the key. That's not for everyone, but I found that really helpful. I mean, to be clear, I don't do that all the time now. I took up running last year, did my first half marathon. That was pretty good for clearing my head. It didn't necessarily go to the extent I just mentioned with snowboarding or skating, but that did really help. Or even just getting outside, doing a hike, walking the dog, getting fresh air. These things can all help. But the thing I found most beneficial was when you push yourself that little bit harder, and you force yourself to take your mind off things.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Just as we're coming to the end as well, it'd be good to touch on, I guess, the profession as well, and there's been a lot of increased regulation in audit over the years. Seems to be, that there always is, but I think that it makes the job very obviously demanding in terms of the quality standards keeps being asked to be higher, which can place more demand on people in terms of the work that they do. Obviously, using the likes of technology, hopefully it has been helping. Hopefully, it will continue to help. But some people, think about leaving the profession because of that demand on them, due to the regulatory standards demands. Kind of what would your thoughts be on all of that? What would you say to people on that are thinking along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult kind of thought process for people to go through. I mean, some people do think this is pretty challenging. This isn't for me. Maybe if I go to industry, it might be an easier life, and that's absolutely fine. If that's your personality type, watch out what you wish for, though, because not everyone likes that. It's funny. I quite like working with. I've noticed I quite like working with people. Are the type of people that get really restless when they're on holiday, because they're the type of people that are always thinking about, okay, what else can I do? How can I challenge myself? How can I make things better? And they tend to do very well in practice because it is demanding. And again, we need to be very transparent about that. It's exciting. There's a lot of stuff that's happening at the moment. You've mentioned regulation. We've spoken about AI. There's a huge amount of change that is happening. The quality standards are going up. It's becoming a highly specialised profession that needs to kind of adapt to technological change, regulatory change, and as a result, for the people that are attracted to doing that, they'll have an excellent career. And there are lots of people that are still attracted to doing that. And I think that's why we continue to be able to attract high caliber talent, but it's not for everybody. So I think my advice would be to figure out what sort of personality type you are. If you love a bit of a challenge, if you love a bit of change, if you want to build up some skills that are going to stand you in good stead for the rest of your career, then you could stay in practice. And if it doesn't quite work out, you've still got some excellent transferable skills. But if that's not for you, that's absolutely fine. But just figure that out. But I do know so many people that have thought, I could use an easier life here, and they move into something that's a lot slower paced, and they've hated it. Of course, there's people that have had the opposite experience, they've really loved it as well. But I think you need to understand yourself as a person. And you'll make your choices accordingly.
I mean, I would encourage people to read. I don't know if you've read a book called Strength Finders. I can't remember who wrote it now, but you do you kind of do a test, an online test. It gives you a code, and then it gives you your 5 strengths. And one of them is what you're talking about is action. So people that get restless when they don't achieve things. So it might be that they're off work on a Saturday or Sunday, but if they don't do any chores or anything, they feel flat. They need to feel like they've achieved something every day, and that's certainly my personality type, and it's really helpful reading that. And I think the audit profession, you've touched on a really good point. Rather than there needs to be maybe a change in the advertising of it. Like the Marines say, 99% of people need not apply. This isn't for you. And you're right, audit profession is becoming more specialised. There's plenty of fantastic careers, jobs out there in the world that are highly specialised and are not for everybody. And audit is becoming more and more like that. So that's a really good point. I think that's helpful for people to take away from this. Just as we're wrapping up as well, last question I like to ask is just about the next 12 months. Do you have any personal or professional goals for the next 12 months? You that type of person?
I think it's probably quite clear that I am that type of person. I think I've got a million different things that I would like to do. And what I really want to do is get to the Christmas break and sort of reflect on what those things will be. But there's two that are kind of bubbling up to the top at the moment. And, you know, we've already mentioned, you know, working on my business profile. I think that's something that we can all continue to do. I was at a fantastic event a few weeks ago up at Gleneagles. It was a Scale Up Scotland event, and it was really inspiring to be in that room. We heard lots of great speakers, and you know, I'd like to sort of build something that is on a smaller scale but achieves the same type of thing with putting some really good business leaders together in a room and having that sort of peer-to-peer support. So that's something that I'm thinking about, how I can achieve that over the next 12 months, which would be great. On a personal level, time is precious now, but I did used to be a half-decent musician, and I'm now trying to teach my daughter. So my daughter's just working on grade 3 for piano, and I'm getting slightly concerned that if I don't pick that back up, I'm not going to be able to teach her for much longer.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about how I can sort of put that into practice and maybe get back to playing again and kind of blowing off the cobwebs so I can keep on teaching her, because I find that really rewarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to be reflecting all this over the next few weeks and trying to build in some New Year's resolutions.
Great. No, sounds good. I'll be doing likewise. So no, thanks very much for your time, Graham. As you said, I know you're busy, but I really appreciate you coming on. So, and thank you.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Professional Speaks podcast. This podcast was produced by Springwood Studio Productions. Remember, you can watch the episode recording on our YouTube channel, and if you can, please do subscribe and share with all of your friends. The more people who listen to this, the more guests we can have on to share, so that you can learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what you want to achieve in your career. Please also contact me if you have any feedback on this episode. I'd love to hear from you.